Hello. Are you scared? It's me, Darth Rosenblum. I like to dress as somebody evil right before the test is coming up. I think it kind of fits the mood of the class. And this is pretty evil, even with a pink shirt on. That's what I think Darth prefers to wear, but he's expected to wear black, so I'm wearing it in honor of him today. Anyway, hope you folks are doing well. You're not overly stressed by your midterms and all that sort of stuff. We will talk a little bit about our midterm first, and then I'll take some questions after we go through the instructions. I did send them out a little while ago through iLearn, but we can go through them bit by bit today to make sure we understand them. So let's start doing that. Let me share. Oh, you know what I should do? I should not be Darth Vader the whole class, should I? No. Let's take this off. All right. Much nicer. You'd rather take an exam from this guy, wouldn't you? Okay. Here we go. Okay, so let's do this. Let's talk about the exam, and then I will stop and take some questions about the exam. We can, of course, talk about it again on Thursday, but let's get as much down to now as we can. So, as I mentioned, it will be an exam that you can take anywhere between 12 a.m. Tuesday, if you want to get up at 12 a.m. and do it on Tuesday morning, that's great. And you have through Wednesday, all day Tuesday, all day Wednesday, and all day Thursday up until midnight. So you've got that, whatever, 72-hour period. It covers everything through what I'll be talking about on Thursday. I believe there's a small chance we might go fast enough to get to taste perception. That will not be covered on your exam beyond what was discussed in section. And I'll tell you about that in just a second. But my lecture on taste perception, if it starts on Thursday, it might not, won't be covered. However, you did start talking about taste in your discussion section yesterday and on Friday, and whatever was covered in section on taste will be covered on this first exam. So it includes everything through your discussion section material up to Monday, up to yesterday. So I guess that's 4 weeks of discussion section. I can't remember right now offhand. It also covers all the material through Chapter 4, and this should be pretty obvious. Chapters 3 and 4 cover smell. Chapters 1 and 2 cover sound, of course. Since we'll be getting through smell before the first exam, it will cover everything up through Chapter 4, including the preface. There is at least one question on the exam that is taken from the preface. So make sure you read the preface. You know, some of it's just fun reading, but there are a couple of points there that are important. So make sure you read through that. Okay, so that's the material that's covered. It is an open book exam, as I mentioned. So you'll sit there in front of your computer and use iLearn, and you'll be administering the exam to yourself. And you can use your notes, you can use your slides, you can use the book, whatever you want. But two very important things. First of all, it must be taken alone. You cannot do the exam online with a friend. In fact, the questions are going to be presented to you randomly, so they will not be presented in the same order as your friends are getting the questions anyway, and that would be a disaster. But we have found a couple instances where it was pretty clear people took them together, and it doesn't work. We can't allow that. It must be taken on your own, no help from anybody else. It also must be taken in a single setting, so you have an 80-minute period. This is also critical. Once you start that, unless there's a massive computer crash or something like that, which rarely happens, you should finish within that 80-minute period. The only deviation from that is for those of you that have accommodations with the Student Center. I've been told about those. If the accommodation involves a longer period of time to take the exam, like an extra 15 minutes or whatever, I will make sure that gets programmed into how you're taking the exam. So don't worry about it. It will already be part of your exam, that if you have a longer period of time, you will be given that for the exam, okay? The other last thing I wanted to say about the format of the exam is something I've been saying all quarter, which is just because it's an open book exam doesn't mean you don't have to study. So I was just, this is wonderful. I love the fact that I have a son that's a freshman in college, just like many of you are, and he's not had an open book exam before, but this is for some classes how it has to be done because of the online format of it. We have a choice of actually hiring proctors to watch you through the camera, but I don't like to do that. So it is open book, but you have to study. There's going to be about 50 questions. I'll know more about this on Thursday, but there'll be about 50 or maybe a little bit more questions. And there is no way you can get to that exam and finish all 50 questions if you have to look up the answer for each one. I promise you, you will not have enough time to do that. You should study as hard as you would normally study if you were taking the exam closed book in class in the lecture hall. Study as hard as you normally would. And this time you're lucky because if you have questions that you're a little unsure about, you can make note of that as you're going through and go back to that questions after you've finished a first pass on the exam and look up the answer to those questions. So optimally, what you'd want to do is say there's 50 questions. You would take the exam having studied really well, and you'll say, oh, that's easy. I remember that one. Rosenblum actually gave me that one in class, and he gave me that one, but this one's also easy. And you go through and you end up about maybe 10 questions left after maybe, going through it for about an hour or something. You end up with 10 questions. You say, I'm not really sure of these. If you've gone through everything else, you'll have 20 minutes to look up each of those answers. And boy, that's great. But you will not have time to look up a majority of the answers or anything like that. So again, study like it's closed book. It is open book. And just use the open book feature to kind of check your answers if you want to. Okay. Review. Well, the review's been pretty straightforward for this class. You've been given, I sometimes post practice questions, but boy, you've been given a lot better than practice questions, haven't you? You've been given actual questions that are going to appear on the exam along with the answers. So you know exactly the nature of the questions. And I don't know how many we'll probably get through, 10, 15, something like that, questions that I've given you in class. All the rest of the questions on the exam will be of that nature exactly. So you know the formats of the questions. Sometimes it says all of the above is one of the answers, or both A and B, or none of the above. That's how we ask these questions. We have to in order to test on all the information. But you have practice with that. You have great practice, and you have answers to those questions. So maybe almost a third of your test will be given to you for free. Hopefully you'll learn something still from those questions, but you have a good sense of what those will be like. Finally, somebody asked me this. Because the test is running 3 days between Tuesdays and Thursday next week, does that mean we don't have class? We don't have to come to lecture? We don't have to learn the new stuff? And I'd say, no, your parents are paying good money, or you're paying good money to learn a lot. So yes, we will absolutely have a lecture next week, and we'll have a blast. We'll have a lot of fun. You want me to talk as much as I can, trust me. So we will have class. I'll be presenting new material next week, material that will be tested on the next exam. Okay, let me stop here. It looks like there are some questions already, so I'll go ahead and look at those questions. Do we have class on Tuesday and Thursday? Of course you want to have class next Tuesday and Thursday. So Alexa, yes, I'm looking forward to seeing you next Tuesday and Thursday. At that point, I won't want to spend time answering any questions about the first set of material. So we'll just start as if it's the next section of the class, and boy, are we going to have fun. I thought it was this week, Roya. Maybe originally I said we try to get it in on week 4, but you guys are asking so many good questions during the breaks. I've had to go a little slower than normal, so it is next week. Abigail, will my answers be saved if I decide to stop? Yeah, once you finish the exam, Abigail, you're done. So do not finish the exam. Do not hit close or anything like that. It will be pretty clear to you as you start taking the exam. You have to do it. It has to be done in one sitting, and that is very, very important. Most people were wonderfully honest and straightforward in doing this last year and over the summer when I taught this class as well. I did have one student that was clearly stopping the exam, looking up answers, and starting the exam again, and we had to address it. And so this is something that we absolutely are aware of. Just don't do that, okay? Take the exam in one sitting. If there is a computer crash, every once in a while that happens, we have ways of following that up to make sure that's what's going on, and we can give you the remainder of your time. But you know, we are very aware when this happens without a computer crash if it's done intentionally. I think there'll be about 50 questions, Casey. Let's see. How do we find those questions again? David, I assume that you've been coming to lecture and you know that those questions are presented during the lecture. They are actually, because of some weird Zoom quirk, are not recorded in the video, but I've been reciting the questions out loud, and so you'll absolutely know what they are if you've just looked at the videos. Okay. Can we come back and pause the test? No, you cannot, of course. Again, very important, Sabrina. You have to make absolutely sure you take the exam in one sitting. You hit start and you have 80 minutes and it has to be finished in that 80 minutes unless you've been given extensions. Okay? All right. Any other questions about the exam? I think you're going to find it very straightforward. I mean, you know, you've been given so many questions as it is. You know exactly what they're like. And then we're actually going to devote all of our next discussion section. I don't usually like to do this, but I think now there's nothing really, you know, wrong given the circumstances. I want the TAs to be able to help you. So they probably won't, the TAs probably won't be able to redo a lecture for you. So it'd be good for you to come in with questions. If you can do some studying before your discussion section, either Friday or Monday, that would be good if you came in with questions. I think what the TAs like to do is they sometimes like to test, give you practice on the material by playing Jeopardy games. They try to make it fun for you, but you know, they will not redo a lecture for you or something like that. They will answer questions though. Okay, anything else? Okay, so Kangwei asks, to my understanding, the exam will be taken out of the class period. Yes, absolutely. Again, as it says there on the slide, you can take it at any 80-minute period between 12 a.m. Tuesday and midnight Thursday. Okay, great. Any other questions? All right, terrific. Then let's go ahead and begin our new material. So I'm going to leave music. You know, I often talk a little bit more about other things, but I think we're fine. And what I wasn't able to cover, it is in the book, but I will certainly concentrate on the material that I was able to present. But I want to make sure that we get through smell before the exam. And you know what I'd like to do? In order to start the discussion of smell, what I often do is talk about an individual who's interviewed in the book. His name is Carl Wunsch. He's a perceptual psychologist, but he also has a well-known problem that people have called anosmia. And that is when somebody has difficulty smelling. But since that's in your book, I don't really need to repeat it. And instead, I'd like to start this discussion by showing you, introducing you to some people in a video that CNN had posted that discuss the lack of smell and consequently the lack of taste that has occurred because of COVID. Now, you've probably heard this. I mean, this is you know, one of the weird aspects. So people can, you know, be exposed to COVID. This happens in young people, especially. They get exposed to COVID and they have very few other symptoms, but they notice they've lost their sense of smell. Sometimes for some prolonged period. It's not a great thing. And so CNN did some interviews with these individuals, and I think this is a nice way for you to learn about kind of the surprising importance of smell in our everyday lives. So let me do that. Let me share that with you. I think you're going to find it really interesting. Where is that? Shoot. Oh, yes, right here. Oh, okay, hold on a second. That's the Los Angeles Times. Instead, what I want to show you, all right, hold on just a second. I apologize. Shoot. Yes, here it is. Okay, just take a second. Yeah. Huh. It's still does that. Okay, hold on just a second. I guess I can't share a full screen video with you for some reason. So I will share the screen. That's interesting. I did not know that. Okay, so you'll just see a small video in CNN's website, but that gives you the idea. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Let me just make sure it's set so you can hear it. Sorry about this. I keep on having to turn it off. Yeah, it should sound. You should be able to hear this. And again, I apologize, it can't be full screen.
But the chicken itself, it's almost nauseating.
My favorite thing is coffee. I drink it many times a day. When I smell it now, it smells like burnt tires.
Garlic here. When I'm smelling this, like straight up, it's like garbage.
I went from no smell to like maybe 2-3 weeks of mild smells returning. And then the smell went from coming, like returning gradually, like slowly, mildly, to just taking a very bad turn. You go through that, maybe it's just a weird day, maybe something is spoiled, maybe the coffee is rancid, maybe, and then you realize like it's not, I thought there was something going on in my house. I really thought something died in my garage.
It's been about 3 weeks since I've been smelling that burning plastic smell when I eat or shower or brush my teeth. Normally when you're sick and something's wrong, you go to the doctor. They give you the comfort of knowledge. This is what it is. This is the treatment, but it's not really cut and dry in this situation. It's unknown, and I think that's the unnerving part.
I think the hardest part about it is not knowing how to explain it to people, and it's kind of like it's become such like a big part of my life because it's something that I'm dealing with every day. I've had a lot of anxiety about having COVID and not knowing like what effects it can have on my life going forward, and when I'm still having lingering side effects 7 months later, 8 months later from when I was diagnosed, then like it really worries me.
Okay, that gives you a sense. Let's go back to our slide here. Actually, let me put this. Oh, shoot. Okay. Let's go back to our slide. Where is that? Right here. So it's not a bad introduction. I mean, it's troubling. There's no question about it. It's troubling. We're talking about anosmia here, and anosmia had typically been something that was specific to individuals who had something like polyps in their nasal cavity or something like that. But now, I mean, COVID is such a crazy, crazy sort of illness. It seems to be affecting people, the kind of the nerves in their nose in really strange ways. Now, it seems to, after the illness subsides, it seems to come back in most people, although for some people, they've lost their sense of smell for, many weeks, sometimes even months. And then you saw some folks there discussing the fact that even when their sense of smell came back, at least initially, they were kind of having smell distortions. So she said that the coffee tastes like burnt tires, that sort of thing. And that really, it's unclear exactly what COVID is doing to the smell system, but it seems to be affecting things at the level of nerves, and that's why you'd have those smell distortions. Now, something also that video does a nice job of, I think, is really showing that despite what you might think of smell being kind of a secondary sense, maybe one that's not as powerful as seeing or hearing, It is a very powerful sense, and we'll see that through our discussion as we discuss smell. But the loss of smell can be emotionally debilitating. And if you read through that little interview with Carl, there's Carl there. Oops, that's him there. Oops. Yeah. There he is right there, Carl Lynch. And his is not from COVID. He had his in 2010 when I was writing the book. He talks about it. He said that, you know, you don't think intuitively that smell would have that much an effect on your life, so that if you lost it, it would really be something you would strongly notice. But oh my gosh, you know, he's done research on this, and he's found that there's a lot of depression that comes with losing your sense of smell. And that's you know, what these individuals who've had long-term smell problems, smell distortion problems from COVID are reporting, that there is a lot of kind of depression associated with this, which is very consistent with what we've known about anosmia from other sorts of causes. One thing Carl says, and I won't go through the slide. I think the slide's available to you on iLearn if you want to see it. But it just is, you know, it's absolutely the same as in the book. One thing that people with anosmia say very often is the thing that they miss smelling most is actually other people. So yes, you know, Carl, and I imagine these individuals who you saw just now, you know, they're most aware, or they can make themselves most aware of missing their sense of smell by, you know, going to their pantry and opening things up and say, well, there's peanut butter, and I know that peanut butter should have a very distinct smell, but I can't smell it. So that's a very common sort of thing, is to test oneself with peanut butter or coffee or whatever, garlic or other things like that. And so you can kind of force yourself to realize what's missing. But like on a day-to-day basis, what people report missing a lot is the smell of other people. Now, I talked to Carl about this, and I said, so do you miss the smell? When you lose your sense of smell, he kind of, it recurs for him. When you lose your sense of smell, Carl, do you miss the kind of shampoos or the smell of perfume or soaps that people wear? He said, yeah, I do miss that, but I also notice that I can smell people, their natural scent, not their sweat, you know, not their what we used to call body odor, BO in elementary school, but that people do have kind of a characteristic odor, especially people you know well, you recognize that. And when you have anosmia, you miss that. Now, the other thing that they discussed in the video, and certainly Carl discussed this, it says up here, is that very often, because you know our sense of smell and our kind of our conscious awareness of smell is kind of complicated. What people initially notice a lot is that they have problems tasting their food. So if that's one of the things that absolutely has appeared in COVID. You know, people will wonder all of a sudden why food doesn't taste as good as it did before, and you know, you have to kind of severely salt the food or put curry on it or something like that to really taste its flavor. And the reason for that, from what you've learned, in fact, in your discussion sections, is that a lot of our sense of flavor comes from smell. Smell that kind of goes through the back of the throat, you know, up through the back of the nose like that. But smell is, you know, up to maybe 80% of our sense of flavor comes from smell. So people who have anosmia not only have trouble smelling, they have trouble tasting. And that's certainly the case with these COVID patients. So it's a serious thing. I mean, you know, people would say, well, Carl, you're not at least blind. It's not that you're blind or deaf. It's just your sense of smell. And he knows that. He said, yeah, I know I can get around well, but my gosh, it really affects his mood. It affects, he believes it affects his intimate life, his, you know, kind of his relationship with, you know, kind of his relationship, I say his relationship of his memories, with his memories of, you know, his children that are grown and out of the house now. It has a far-reaching influence on those aspects of one's life. It's a real problem. But it's nice that he kind of talks of it like this, because he really kind of brings up something very important. And that is that the smell of other people is something that's probably more important to us than we realize. So I'm just going to zoom through this slide now. You can see it if you want, but it's certainly in the book. But this is what I'm interested in talking about now, the smell of other people. And there's tons of research suggesting that you are sensitive to these sorts of dimensions. This stuff's so cool. I just need to step back for a second and say, before I wrote my book, I knew a lot about auditory perception, certainly, and a lot about multisensory integration, and a lot about visual perception because I taught it in my perception class. I knew very little about smell. Smell's the sort of thing like in a perception class you maybe devote half a lecture to typically. But I went into the literature and I came out thinking, boy, smell is the bomb. Do you folks still say that? The bomb? That's a good thing. It is just so interesting, and so much interesting research has happened just over the last 15 years or so. We are using our smell system much more than we realize. Much of it, in fact, is unconscious. We'll first concentrate on the conscious aspects of smell in the sense of what we can kind of, draw our attention to and that sort of thing. But I think what happens with smell, and one of the reasons it's often studied less often than vision or hearing, is because, imagine yourself walking into a room. You might initially smell something. If it's a kitchen, you might smell what's cooking. If it's a living room, you might smell the carpet if it has an odor, or if you have a doggy like I do, you smell the doggy. But after a little while, even with the doggy smell, you habituate to it, and after a few minutes, you don't really notice any smells at all. Consciously. Unconsciously, your brain is analyzing smells all the time, and that processing of smells is having an influence on you even without your conscious awareness. In some ways, smells are, our sense of smell is a really kind of cool example of having kind of secret perceptual skills that don't typically reach consciousness, because that's exactly what we're dealing with here. And so I'm going to go through this literature, and the book goes through some of the details too. And I think you're just going to find this interesting, especially if you've never considered this before. But let's start off talking about this. And what this literature shows, what this research shows, is that Carl's intuitions, other people who have anosmia, their intuitions about the smell of somebody is right on. Because we do all smell differently. We all have scent signatures. Okay, let me just step back and I will give you a little hint about where we're going here. We all smell differently from each other unless we have an identical twin. Then our, quote, sense signatures are indistinguishable. But we'll get back to that in just a second. This does assume we all have these separate smells. And what we're talking about here are natural odors, right? We're not, again, talking about BO, the sweaty smell you smell after you're working out. The smell is, and I try not to be, a little gross here, but if you sleep in your t-shirt and you wake up the next morning and you take off your t-shirt and put it down, and if you were to, kind of walk out of the room and go back to the room and then pick it up so you're not used to your own smell, when you smell your t-shirt after wearing it overnight, okay, that's your scent signature more or less. Okay? It's not a terrible smell. It's not a BO smell. It smells worn and it smells like you. Right? Now, we're not always conscious of, certainly we're not very conscious of our own scent signatures because we walk around with them. But if it's on a t-shirt with, some kind of degree of intensity, we can be made aware of that sort of thing, which is really interesting. So what I'm going to be talking about are sets of experiments here where that is in fact exactly how this thing is tested. People are asked to wear t-shirts, or sometimes underarm swab samples are taken. And then they are presented to other people who are asked questions about the people who wore the t-shirt, whether or not you can recognize somebody like a friend, whether or not you can recognize your siblings, that sort of thing. The underarm swabs, again, I want to make sure we understand this, that we're not talking about stinky, workout sweat. Okay, this is our odor, our scent signatures are secreted from our underarms, but it's not the kind of BO that we're typically used to being very aware of in the gym or something like that. It is a natural scent from a person. Okay, so here's what we know. So these are, as I said, experiments where these either t-shirts or underarm swabs are given to people and people are asked to recognize individuals as our first example. As it turns out, that was something you could do when you were born. And there's lots of ways of testing it with newborns. It has to do with testing their alertness. But if you give a newborn a swab of their mother's underarm, even if the mother is not in the room, okay, they will become very attentive to it. To the degree they can, they will move their little newborn heads and face where the smell is coming from, which you've learned a little bit about, localizing smells. And that was something you could do from birth. That was something you could do right away. Not only do you recognize your mother's scent from her underarms, for example, you can also recognize the amniotic fluid that you spent the last 9 months in, right? So that's the fluid that you're swimming in, and you might know a little bit about how that's kind of made and produced and all that stuff. But both your mother's natural scent and your own natural scent has a role in what that smells like. So now you got your newborn, instead of bringing in a swab of the mom's scent, you bring in the swab of the amniotic fluid that the child was just born in. Maybe a few days after they were born. You save it, you put it on a swab, and it's like, little newborn. That's Rosamund the newborn kind of being attentive, right? And they'll show that they can in fact do that. It works the other way as well. The mothers can recognize their child's amniotic fluid. And here you can just ask it. You have 5 swabs out in front, say, give each a sniff and tell us which one smells like your child. Which one smells like your child? And in this case, it will be samples from the amniotic fluid itself. And so mothers can recognize the amniotic fluid that their child had spent 9 months floating in, which is pretty cool. After you get a little older, you can start to recognize your sibling's scent. Okay, so if you have full siblings, if by the time you were 5, if you were given a set of 10 t-shirts and say, one of these is from your sister, one of these is from your brother, can you guess which one it is? You'd say, yeah, it's this one. I can smell it. This is Cindy's t-shirt. This is my brother Tommy's t-shirt. And you can do it pretty accurately. So by the time you're 5, you can do that. And that is something you can do today. That is something, if we tried it in the lab, if I brought you 10 t-shirts as an adult, you'd be able to sniff the 10 t-shirts and say which one was your sibling without a problem. And that's maintained all through your life. This, importantly, my notes are over here right now, that's why I keep looking down, is something that you'll see also works with half siblings, but full siblings a little bit better. But parents can recognize their children's scent. So moms can recognize their children's scent almost immediately. It sometimes takes dad maybe a few months to recognize their child's scent, but they can do the same thing based either on little onesies, t-shirt things, or swabs. They can recognize their child's scent. I think it does take a little longer for the dad than the mom, and that's partly, I imagine, because the mom's own scent played a role in the amniotic fluid. Okay, but they do a good job with this, except this one exception that I said earlier. What they are not good at is being able to determine which t-shirt came from which of their identical twins. So if they have identical twins, or they have 2 little boys, identical twins, they could go through the 10 t-shirts and say, yep, these are the 2 t-shirts from my twins. Okay, which one's Billy and which one's Willie? Because if you have identical twins, you got to give them rhyming names. And you say, I don't know. I know these are our kids. I don't know whose t-shirts these are, but these are our kids. I can't tell the difference. I don't know the difference. Also true, that's why I have dog tracking on here, also true of dog tracking. So you probably know something about dogs can be trained to track scents, and they seem more sensitive. They have, first of all, their nose is close to the ground, which helps a lot, but they have a more kind of sophisticated hardware in some ways, and that's how you can use a dog to track somebody who's missing, somebody who's running from the law. And dogs are really good at this, especially ones that have been trained. However, they can't tell the difference between identical twins. Same thing, right? I think I say in the book, if you're on the lam, if you're being chased by the police, go wherever your identical twin is, and the dogs won't be able to know which one is which. And at least you'll get away, but your identical twin, the good twin, okay, the good identical twin will be brought to jail. You, as the evil twin, will get away. All right, which is interesting. What is it then? What is it that makes up the scent signature? It suggests, even if you don't know anything about, what's going on with identical twins in terms of the biology, what it suggests is there a genetic component to what goes into our scent signature, right? Because identical twins have the same, kind of genetic makeup. And we're talking about identical now, not fraternal or anything like that. Identical twins have the same makeup, and if that genetic makeup is influencing the scent signature, then it's not surprising that they would have scent signatures that are, for all intents and purposes, the same, which is kind of cool. So we will come back to this idea that there's a genetic component of the scent signature. Okay, a little bit more now about step siblings and stuff like that. So parents can recognize their step siblings. So, like reblended families and things like that. You move in and the mom had children with another person, the dad had children with another person. They come back together. The question is now, can the mom recognize by scent the children of the dad, right? And the answer is yes, but less well than their own biological siblings, which also kind of gives a clue about the genetic component. And it's also true with siblings. So siblings can recognize their step siblings if they've spent some, a number of years living with them, for example. But always, even in fact, if they've lived with their step siblings for a longer period of time than they've lived with their biological siblings, for whatever reason, they will still recognize their biological siblings better than their step siblings. They will be able to do it, but with less consistency, which is really interesting. What is that about? Well, again, it seems like there's this genetic component to what goes into our scent signature that allows us to do person detection through scent. And it could, in fact, be that the genetic kind of commonality between two people who are biological siblings, or a mother and a child who have a similar or related genetic makeup, in fact, allows this to happen. So hypothetically, it could be that parents are better with their real siblings, parents are better with their biological children than their stepchildren, because their biological children have a genetic makeup that is, deviates just a bit from their own. And so a child's scent signature could be like their biological parents' scent signature. So there might be some similarities. And there certainly are chemical similarities. Whether or not they are kind of detectable similarities is unclear. Okay. I think that's a good place to stop and answer some questions. We'll be doing more of this in just a second, but let's take a quick break, answer some questions, and then we'll do a practice question. Okay, these are all about the exam. I've already answered these. Is there participation? Okay. So some people are asking questions about where the recordings of the videos are and everything. Folks, I mean, I'm trying to be as, okay. They're on YouTube. It's all, it's in the syllabus, it's in the first lecture, all this stuff. Please, before you ask questions about this, I just request that you go back and look at all the instructions we gave. But it's on YouTube, and there was a link sent out, multiple links were sent out. In the beginning of the quarter, you received emails and all that stuff. Roya says the virus can take my lungs, but I refuse to take my I refuse it to take my sniffers. I mean, I think you have a sense from listening to these people talk how upsetting what they're going through can be. It's absolutely true. Now we just say bomb. Now we don't say the bomb. Thanks, Roya. I'll catch up on that lingo. If the identical twins grew up apart, do they still have the same smell? Yes. Up to a certain degree, that there is something that affects the temporary scent signature that has to do with diet. So if one of the twins has a pure vegetarian diet and the other twin has a pure meat diet, at that time, right after, a day or so after eating those meals, they will smell a little different. But as soon as they go back and eat the same things, bam, it's completely the same. So this, and also I should say, I'm not sure if many scientists qualify how food affects our scent as part of our natural scent signature. I'm not quite sure whether they consider that part of the natural scent signature. But yes, you can imagine. Maybe you've noticed before that, people that eat certain food, the next day they will smell like that food a little bit. But that wanes after a while, and what comes back is just their scent signature. Okay. Okay. I don't know if you've heard about this, says Anna, but the lady who can smell Parkinson's disease, but do you think this is actually possible? Okay. I don't know, Anna. I know that there is supposedly research with dogs that have been trained to smell certain types of cancers or certain types of diseases.
Make her smell diabetes.
I'm sorry, say that again. I could hear you. So say it again. Diabetes, is that what you said? I'm having trouble.
Sorry, I did not know I was on mute.
Oh, okay. All right. That's no problem. You can stay on mute. But yeah, I have heard of these things. Okay, so I'll just tell you my understanding of it. When I looked through that literature 10 years ago, there was just some emerging stuff having to do with some dogs being trained. It was too new for me to put it in the book, and there was nothing about people having an awareness of smell. That being said, it could have started to come out over the last 10 years. I have not checked into it. It's a good question. As of 10 years ago, there wasn't enough evidence for me to put that in the book. Everything in the book is well supported by lots of research. So at that point, that wasn't there. But it's a very, very good question. Yes, the midterm covers smell. You will have poll questions. How long would someone be living with one sibling until they distinguish the siblings? So Brittany asks, rough estimate, how long would someone have to be living with one of their siblings or half siblings until they can distinguish the? You can discover, okay, so here's the deal. Say you were separated at birth, and then you were told that you were separated at birth, and before you get to meet your sibling, we want to see if you can recognize them to smell, and here's the 10 t-shirts. Go ahead, and I know you haven't met them yet. You have no idea what they're like, but separated at birth or separated after a few years, go ahead and see if you can recognize your sibling. And you would absolutely be able to do that after having never met them before. Clearly what's going on here is if there's a biological connection between people, they have some sort of like onboard ability to recognize people with some commonality in the genetic makeup. If, on the other hand, it's like a step sibling or a friend or a significant other, you can become familiar with a person's scent, but it's still not going to be as good as it is with your genetic family. Can people smell the difference between their pets? Yes, they can to some degree. As far as I understand, they can smell the difference between two dogs, I think. You can, people can recognize their dog's scent if every dog. Oh, let's put t-shirts on dogs because dogs look so ridiculously cute with t-shirts. And then you pass the t-shirts out and say, which one's your dog? Which one's Max? And I'll smell and say, oh yeah, this one's Max. People do recognize their dogs, and I believe they can recognize if they have two dogs, which is which. What long-term romantic partners? We're about to discuss that. Would twins be able to smell each other even though it is said that they share a scent? So could they? So did identical twins know which t-shirt is theirs if they've gotten t-shirts from both? I believe the answer to that is no. However, I am not 100% certain. I believe there was research on that, and I can't be certain, but I believe that whenever you're dealing with identical twin scent signatures, that not even the twins can make that. I think that's true. It's a great question. Long-term partners, we're about to talk. We'll talk about that in just a second. Okay, so let's do our polling question. This should be very straightforward. We just went through this, but hey, free question. Here's the question. Anosmia is an ailment in which patients, 1, often have trouble hearing high pitches, 2, often have trouble smelling, 3, often have trouble tasting, or D, both B and C. Should be easy. And it's a way of making sure you know the difference between, anosmia and amusia, but it's even easier than that. Good. I'll give you another 15 seconds or so. Again, there's no grading of these questions, no ramifications whatsoever. It's just for you to have a practice question and no actual question in the exam, lucky you. All right, that's good. Most of you have voted. I'm going to end it here just to go through the question and share the results. And so that now is the time you take the picture if you want. The correct answer is in fact 4D, both B and C. So a lot of you did say correctly that you do have trouble smelling with anosmia. But since you've learned in discussion section, and I said it again today, and it was discussed also in the video a little bit, that not only does the loss of a sense of smell have an effect on what you smell, it has a very strong effect on what you taste. As I had on that slide about Carl, and you can read more about this, Carl, like many anosmics, first noticed his problem because food tasted bland. He'd have to put a lot of salt on it. He'd have to put a lot of curry on it. What's that? Sriracha, is that how you pronounce it? That sauce, he loves that. This is the way he has to enjoy food when he has an anosmic episode. So it does affect smell directly, but indirectly, it has a very strong effect. So it dilutes flavors. And that's often how people notice it before they notice that they're not smelling the right way. Okay? Great, take a picture. There you go. I'm going to close the question. Looks like there's 2 more quick chat questions. Let's look at those. Sriracha. Alex, thank you. I think I have some in my fridge, and I will teach my family that later. Great. Okay, terrific. It's not Sriracha? Sriracha. Okay, thank you. All right, let's go back. We got that. Cool. Bring this out. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about non-relatives, because as I said, that experience living with somebody, experience spending time with somebody, and especially a romantic partner with whom you're physically very close a lot of time. Yes, you can certainly recognize the scent of familiar non-relatives, friends. You could do romantic partners, roommates, certainly. So you were on campus, I believe, right? I think some of the dorms are open. My son, it's a long story, but he just moved. He had a kind of awful living situation, so he moved in a fraternity house. And he says, when he was joining the fraternities and doing tours, he said, fraternity houses have very strong smells. I said, I don't want to know the details of that, but I'm sure after he lives in the fraternity house for a while, and he has not a roommate, but a suite mate, that he'll be able to recognize that friend from a t-shirt, but certainly romantic partners. But even if we've lived with our romantic partners, so my wife and I have been married for 21 years now, okay? And I lived with my parents less than that, 17 years. And I certainly live with my sibling less than that as well. I would still be able to recognize my brother's t-shirt more easily and more consistently than I'd be able to recognize my wife's t-shirt, because there is something about having a relative, something about the scent signature of a relative that makes it easier. So again, based on every kind of clue I've been giving about what goes into the scent signature, we can ask this question now. What are we smelling exactly? What determines the scent signature? And there's been really cool research on this over the last 10 years or so, 15 years when I was writing the book. And that has to do with a part of our genome that has a fancy name. I'm going to give you the fancy name, but we can just abbreviate it after that. It's called the Major Histocompatibility Complex. We'll abbreviate it as MHC. And, I'm not going to try to fool you by using a very close but different name. You just need to understand what this is about. What MHC is kind of a very kind of complicated part of the genome, and that's actually what you're seeing here. It's a very dense, complicated part of the genome. And what it's supposed to code for is not only our own scent signature, but more importantly than that, our immune systems and our autoimmune systems. So, you probably have met people who seem to have weaker immune systems than other people. that have autoimmune problems, that sort of thing, that is at least partly related to the structure of that part of the genome, the major histocompatibility complex. And it also influences our natural odor. Okay, why would those things be related? Why would the immune system and the type of immune system, the kind of characteristics of our specific immune system relate to our natural odor? Good question. I'm glad I asked that. Because it seems in other animals at least, and very possibly in us, it helps us find mates to some degree with us, to a large degree with other animals. So this is what's called sociosexual influences on how this works with finding a mate. So what we know is that two mice fall in love. Okay, this will be a very romantic story. And they fall in love not because they have that much in common. In fact, one's a Democrat, one's a Republican. You know, one likes hip hop, the other one likes rock. Okay, they don't have a lot in common. But what they really like in each other is each other's scent. And if you look at their genetic makeup, what you would find is something very interesting. That their major histocompatibility complex, and therefore their immune system, actually complements the other's major MHC. Okay, this is what I mean by complements. Okay, so think about this. You know, I have a genetic makeup to be immune to certain things in certain ways, and my wife has one too. Now, if I can find a mate, I'm going to go back to being a mouse because I feel much more comfortable talking about this with mice because we're still unsure about people. If I was a mouse and I wanted to have offspring that were healthy, that were really robust, that lived a long time and could have, you know, their own offspring, a lot of their own offspring, so I could kind of forward my genes down my mousy generations, I would want to find a female mouse that had a genetic makeup that kind of filled in where my genetic makeup was a little lacking. So my genetic makeup is going to allow me to be immune to some diseases, but not other diseases. If I can find a mate that has a genetic makeup that kind of fills in the gaps where I'm missing some, and I fill in the gaps where she's missing some, then we have a really good chance to have offspring that have a very strong immune system. Okay, so that's great. That's a great thing for evolution to do. Is like, you know, the healthier the offspring, the more immune they are to different sorts of diseases. That's a good thing. So how do I find that mouse with the genetic system, the immune system that kind of complements mine, that fills in the holes? Smell. So I'm sniffing around and trying to find an attractive smell in a female mouse. When I find that attractive smell, okay, I'm actually finding a mouse who has an immune system that kind of fills in the holes where I'm missing strength in an immune system. This is my complementarity, I guess you can say, sort of hand gesture. That my immune system's good, but I'm missing some stuff. Her immune system's good, but she's missing some stuff. Wouldn't it be great if they fit together so we could then have baby mice that have extra strong immune systems? How do we find each other? Smell. So this part of the genome, the major histocompatibility complex, the MHC, codes for the immune system and the autoimmune system for us, and also codes for smell and potentially attractiveness. It's really cool. And as you'll see later, it does have some bearing on how, I would say, humans find different people's smells attractive. So I'm kind of getting a little bit ahead of myself here. You'll see this on Thursday. But if this is especially going to work for female subjects in this case, if you know, you had 10 T-shirts from my son's fraternity. You do not want those T-shirts. You gave them, you know, everyone wore it overnight and you know, they didn't use soap or anything like that. Don't worry, they're not going to smell that bad. And then you gave them to a woman. a woman in a sorority or something like that, and she smells them and said, which guy do you think smells the best? Here's their t-shirts. Which guy would you want to go out on a date with? And she smells through these and say, I don't know. I don't know what they're like. I mean, there's lots of things that would determine whether or not I want to date them, but just based on smell, yeah, this one right here. She'd hold up the t-shirts. And then what you could do is you could look at the genetic makeup of the man, the MHC of the man that wore that t-shirt and her genetic makeup, and you'd find, in fact, there was a nice complementarity between their immune systems. Isn't that cool? Now you're thinking, oh boy, I'm dating somebody right now. I better make sure that they have complementary immune systems. Don't worry. With people, we're talking about people now versus mice, a lot more goes into it. I could imagine that even if you love that person's smell, if they like hip hop, if you like rock and roll, it might not work out, right? There's a lot of other stuff that goes on. People are much more complex. But the fact that when people are just judging something based on smell, even though it's not something you maybe typically do in that type of context, that it does predict the potential kind of fitting together of the immune systems, that's really interesting. It's kind of a holdover from kind of the evolution going from little mices to ourselves, which is really interesting. Now, you're thinking one more thing, I can tell. I can just tell you're thinking one more thing. It's like, how important are these natural scents, right? Because you've dated people maybe and they've worn a certain cologne or used a certain shampoo, and my gosh, you end up loving that smell, right? And that's really, so, if you've dated somebody and you've liked that smell, the next time, and then you've broken up, the next time you smell that smell, maybe walking through a shopping mall and somebody's wearing a perfume or a cologne or something like that, oh, that reminds me of so-and-so. I love that smell, right? That's the sort of thing we're consciously aware of, right? That kind of perfumes, that sort of thing. Well, here's something you'll find very interesting. That the perfume a person decides to wear is, in fact, influenced by their own scent signature. And some of you might know this. I don't wear a lot of stuff, a lot of cologne. I did a little bit back in my single days, but not even, as much as other people. Back in when I was, on the dating scene, we were listening to disco, and people wore, guys wore a lot of cologne, but I never really liked the smell of that stuff. But I was aware of this, and some of you, if you wear perfume and cologne now, you might be aware of this. That certain perfumes, for example, will smell good on one person, but not that good on another person, right? Say, boy, that woman has a great perfume. I think I'm going to wear it too, so I can smell as good as she does. And then you put it on in the store or something like that, and it just doesn't smell as good as it does on her, right? You may have had that experience, and that is because your scent signature does influence how the chemistry of the cologne or perfume mixes with your body. And so these things that are natural scent signatures, which are potentially coding for things like our immune system, right, have a bearing on the perfumes and colognes we choose. So one way of thinking about this, and I want to make sure that I'm not going too far. I have to be careful here. But one way of thinking of colognes and perfumes is it amplifies part of our scent signature. And so if you, in fact, have fond memories of a specific perfume, Axe body spray or something like that, it could be because that Axe body spray smelled good on that person, just because it mixed well with their body chemistry, their scent chemistry, and amplified it in some way. So you are still being, in some ways, influenced by their scent signature. Okay? This is another good place to take a break, because I often get a lot of questions here, and it will allow me to do another one of our polling questions, but I want to make sure we have more time to go through the rest of this lecture. All right. So Jasmine asks, so you said that mothers can sense their children, so for your wife, would she be able to tell your sunset more than yours? Absolutely. She absolutely would. And now you made me very sad. No, I'm kidding. She would, and I would too. I'd be able to recognize my son's scents more easily or more consistently than my wife's. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm almost positive I would be able to pick her t-shirt out of 10. But it might take me a little while longer. I might be a little less consistent if I had to do it again and again and again. With my kids, it would be like bam, 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 bam. So it is, you can certainly recognize your wife and husband's or significant other signature, but when it comes to somebody who has a biological, a family connection, genetic connection to you, you recognize those better. So the better the immune system, no, okay. You're asking a very good question, Teresa. I'm really glad you asked this question. Let's be careful not to get too, well, I'll answer your question. So the better the immune system, the better, the stronger the smell. No, it doesn't have to do with how strong the smell is or how good the smell is. In general, it's not like there's an objective person who comes in and says, oh, this is a good smelling immune system, this is a bad. It really can't be evaluated like that, I don't think, at least it couldn't back in 2010. But what it does mean is that the way to think about this is the complementarity. So a woman comes in, chooses a t-shirt that smells the best to her. There's a good chance that the guy she chose the t-shirt from is going to have an immune system that complements hers. So the idea is offspring. The idea is how can we make our offspring the strongest? One way to think about this is mutts. So Max the dog, who you all met, is a mutt. Right? He's a cross between I guess his license it says terrier poodle something mix. And you might know this, that mutts that have genetic influences from a lot of different sources tend to be healthier dogs than purebreds. You might know this from, if you raise dogs or if you've had both types of dogs, it's generally known that they are less prone to diseases. They usually have longer lives. Mutts do live longer. And most of us are mutts, right? We're not coming from purebred families or anything like that. So that's a good thing because, if you're coming from one family, you'll have this genetic makeup. Coming from another family, you'll have this genetic makeup. And the ones that fit together and complement each other to create a child that has an extra strong immune system, that's the better one. Okay, so it really is specific to specific individuals. Do autoimmune diseases make a person's scent less strong? Does it make the person's scent less? These are really good questions, Alexa, just like Teresa's question. I don't know. And that, in fact, could be, to some degree, maybe what can be detected by dogs. No, but dogs are detecting, as far as I understand this new research, they're detecting specific diseases. So that is different from the scent signature. But you're still right. You still would be right. Maybe somebody with a very weakened immune system or weakened autoimmune system, maybe they do have a different kind of quality of scent. That could absolutely be the case. What are gaps to be filled? Okay, I understand people have questions on this. The way to think about this is here's Rosenblum the mouse's immune system, and I'm really good at warding off colds, but not sore throats. And I'm just making this up. And do mice have sore throats? I'm warding off, I don't know, other types of diseases. So I'm good with some diseases, but not other ones. And here comes Rosenblum's, the mouse's wife, and she happens to have a good immune system for the things I don't have a good immune system for. And this is what's meant by filling the gaps. Okay, if I'm good with colds, she might not be good with colds. She might be good with sore throats or something. This is really kind of silly. But it seems that it would make sense for an animal to find a mate that had an immune system that could kind of complement its own. So it doesn't make me as a daddy mouse healthier or her as a mommy mouse healthier, but boy, are our offspring going to have a good chance to have a healthy immune system. So that's we're filling in the gaps so we have healthy offspring, basically. That's what that's about. Alex asks if I personally prefer the smell of sweet kind of cologne or more flowery kind of cologne. I'm not a fan of cologne, which is too bad because my wife really likes wearing perfume. And so typically what has to happen is she has to put it on in another room and I can't see her for a little while. The perfume has to be very weak. I have an extra strong, I think, sense of smell. I can detect smells that other people can't, and perfumes are overwhelming to me, but that's just me. Can you smell if a person has a bad medical history? I unfortunately don't know that now. I don't know very much about that. Mia asks, do some people have complementary immune systems that everyone would be attractive to? Okay, so are there some scent signatures that are generally more popular or more attractive than others? And that's a really good question. You guys ask such good questions. I don't know that. I am very aware of the complementarity sort of research. I don't know if yeah, I think it does. And I think we're going to get into this later a little bit. Let me hold off. Let me check on that. And I think this is something we're going to address just kind of peripherally later on. It's a really, really good question. Could we improve our ability to smell through practice? Absolutely. Perfumers clearly do this, right? This is, we're going to go after the test into taste specialists. And see how they can improve their sense of taste. And we're going to learn that through a wine connoisseur, a person who actually teaches people to recognize wines and things like that. The same would hold true for a perfumer. A perfumer has to learn to be very, very sensitive to kind of the combinations of scents that go into anything. And yes, so in that case, they are learning to become better smellers. Can that also have a bearing on how well they can recognize somebody's scent signature that's not wearing perfume? Very good question. I don't know if that's the case. That's a great question, though. Does it make you think that my wife smells better than my son's? Wait, Carrie asks, but does this make you think that your wife smell better than your son's because your son's probably has somewhat of the same? Yeah, no, I can assure you my wife smells better than my son's. I understand what you're saying. It's like I'm not necessarily sure. You know, when I to the degree that we smell our scent signatures by smelling a T-shirt after we wore it, I'm not sure I would call that necessarily more or less pleasant. I think my wife's smell is better than my smell, for example. Yeah, I understand the question. So okay, let's move on and do a. Boy, I hope we have a poll question that I can ask because we just got through one slide. But let me see if we do. Yeah, we do, right here. Okay, here we go. Which is true about newborn infants' abilities to smell? Okay, which is true about a newborn infant's ability to smell? So it's a couple of slides ago. 1, they can recognize their mother's scent. 2, they can recognize the scent of their own amniotic fluid, what they were swimming in. 3, both A and B, both 1 and 2. Or D, none of the above are true. You should know this answer. This should not be a problem for you. Look back on the previous slide. It should be very obvious. Wow. Okay. No problem. You're doing great. This one's easy. I thought it would be. Okay. How many? I'll give you another 5 seconds. Again, you're not being tested. Oh, okay. There's something I want to say about voting, so I'm going to put this here to remind me. Okay, let's end here. And you'll see you were mostly correct. 87% of you got the right answer. Yes, an infant can recognize its mom's scent. If you take a underarm swab of the mom and put it in front of the infant will, get it all attentive and excited. Versus putting a scent from another mom another mom that just had a baby. It's one's own mom. They seem to be able to detect. And then also you can do the same thing with the amniotic fluid. So both A and B are true, making the correct answer for the exam C or 3. Okay. Terrific. Go ahead, take a quick picture of that if you haven't yet. And I have something to announce about Tuesday's class. Yes, I know that some of you will be affected by this. If, in fact, you need to take the time that the class usually meets 5. I guess the polls are open until 8. If you want to go from 5 to 6:30 and attend, or not attend the live class, but vote, by all means do. It's really, really important. The video will be available to you. So that's not, I never take a, roll attendance anyway. But, if your day is really busy and you're not sure you can vote, skip my class. You can get the video later on. Okay, voting is really important. Okay, let's continue now. And now we're going to move into the stuff I think is bomb. Did I say it right? Not the bomb. Is really bomb. And that has to do with subliminal odors. And what do I mean by subliminal odors? Let's be careful here. This is a term, subliminal, that a long time ago at least used to imply that there was some sort of coercion, some sort of, kind of sneaky way of manipulation. And I want to make sure that that's not what we mean here, because as you're going to see, it's going to play kind of an interesting part in this story. Subliminal means literally just below our threshold of awareness. That's all it means, just below our threshold of awareness. But something can be influencing or get when we're talking about the brain, get into the brain without our awareness. We can't, our brains can process subliminal odors. Subliminal just means you're not consciously aware of the odor being there. And this is where smell research gets really interesting. And one way I kind of got into this was by interviewing these two individuals, and you'll see that they're very colorful individuals. There they are right now, in that picture right there. They are probably the most successful environmental decor aroma designers in the world. They're kind of, I think it had been done a little bit before, but they really made it popular. And Mark, who you can see there, the gentleman there, is the one that came up with this system that disperses odors into places like hotel lobbies and department stores and other places where people will be. Eileen is the one that designs the scents. And what they've done is they've probably almost a majority of the hotels, at least the higher end hotels you go into now, I don't know, the Four Seasons certainly, the W hotels, those, and even like mid-range hotels have some sort of scent that is dispersed into the hotel lobby. Now, it's a very light scent. It's not strong. You probably notice it when you first walk in, and it smells pleasant. Maybe like flowers, maybe like citrus, something like that. But it's something that your nose gets used to very, very quickly. So this is called the environmental aroma business. It is something that is used in department stores, and sometimes you'll have a different scent that's being administered to different sections of the department store. So the baby section might have something like a powdery scent. The summer wear section with the bikinis might have something like a coconut scent or something like that. You get the idea. Again, it's light. These are very light. They're very careful both in the kind of administering it through the ventilation system, and the design of the scents themselves is very subtle. They don't want people to get nauseous, certainly, or kind of find it off-putting. So it's very light. It's a very light scent. But talking to these folks are fascinating. So I'll talk about this again later when we talk about multisensory perception. But Eileen, what she tries to do when she's designing scents for a hotel lobby is she will take pictures of the lobby and take close-ups of the different materials that the lobby is composed of. Maybe there's a big glass sheet, on one wall, and on another wall it's all wood paneling, that sort of thing. Or if she's designing something for the Death Star, like I'm in right now, she would have a specific scent for that. But the idea here is that she wants the scent in some ways to match the visible decor of the place. I'll talk more about that later, but when I was talking to her about this, I can't imagine how to even start doing that. How do you get a collection of scents so you have some sort of administered perfume-like odor that matches, the wall paneling, or that matches the color of the marble on the desk as you're checking in. She says, "Oh, I have lots of ways of thinking about that. It's just fascinating." Okay, but here's the big story. Here's the kind of big flashy story. Have you folks been to the Mirage Hotel, the one in Vegas? It's one of the more popular ones. You have the zoo in back, the Siegfried and Roy Zoo that's in the back. It's fun, it's kind of flashy. I believe there's a kind of a big fiery volcano thing in the front of it, as I remember right. It is one of the first. It was one of the first kind of theme. I guess I would say kind of big theme casinos that grew up in Vegas. I actually was, I had moved to Southern California and had visited Vegas a few times when this was happening. It was a really interesting thing. So they were knocking down all the old kind of classic, hotels from the 30s and 40s and 50s, and then slowly but surely these giant mega complexes were built. And the idea behind these were that they would have a big theme like a mirage, in the desert, or a pyramid, or what else is there? Yeah, the Excalibur, which to me looks like a giant kind of miniature golf ornament, but you get the idea. And the Mirage was one of the first, and you might know a little bit about this. The owner of the Mirage, if you've ever seen the Ocean's 11 movies, right? The guy, what's his name? Terry, the Andy Garcia character, is modeled after Steve Wynn, who owns the Mirage and owns the Wynn Casino, and I think one or two others down there. And he wanted this casino to be very special, so he brought in Eileen and Mark and said, "Can you put a scent in our lobby?" And they said, "Sure, we'll try to match the Mirage theme. We'll do our best." And they brought him scents week after week, and he said, nope, that's not what I want. That's not what I want. I want something different. I have an idea what I want, but it's not what you've been giving me. And Eileen said what she realized is that Steve Wynn wanted the scent of vacation. He wanted people to feel like they were on vacation when they went into the casino. And what he really wanted was the smell of suntan lotion, which is coconut very often. You probably know that a lot of suntan lotions have a coconut smell to them. And when they did that, they brought it. He said, "That's exactly what I want. I want that smell in my casino." So they did it. Right after the Mirage opened, okay, it did amazingly well. Gangbusters. I mean, people were flocking from all the other casinos and going to the Mirage. And all the other casino owners wanted to know what happened, and they started wondering if it had something to do with the smell, the suntan lotion smell that was in the casino. And they started claiming that, yes, there's a smell in the casino that is coercing people into staying in the casino and gambling. It's hypnotizing them. It's making them stay there where they don't really want to. And Eileen and Mark said, "No, it's just the smell of suntan lotion we put in there. There's nothing hypnotizing about it at all." They were the target of a 2020 investigation and all this stuff. Are these people hypnotizing you into doing things you don't want to do? And the answer, as far as we know it, is absolutely not, right? What this smell does is it kind of adds to the decor of the hotel, very much like, I don't know, what else is in that casino? There's a beautiful fish tank, tropical fish tank behind the front desk, okay? That adds to the decor. There's palm trees everywhere in the casino. That adds to the decor. The sound and lights, that adds to the decor, and the smell does too. But none of those things kind of unconsciously coerce you into doing something you don't want to do. But people seem to be more scared of smells for some reason. There seems to be a mystery behind smells where they don't quite trust it like they do their other senses. And that's a very interesting characteristic. As it turns out, part of that probably comes from this idea that unlike the lights, unlike the sound, after a while, when you're in the casino, you no longer smell that smell, but your brain is constantly using the odor, even if you don't have an awareness of it. And that's what we'll start talking about next class. Okay, that's a good place to end. And we'll see you Thursday.